Hello, thank you for coming to my talk. A couple of minutes ago I was slightly nervous because there were about 3 people in the room, so it's great to see so many people in here. That's me. The tag there is my handle on Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, anything else you choose to mention with Gram at the end. So if you want to follow me or make contact afterwards, please do so. So my clicker is not working. That probably would help, wouldn't it? Thank you. So what am I doing here? I'm a developer solutions architect. At the moment, I'm working as a developer advocate. That might make you think, what is this total fraud doing at a test conference? She does not have tester, quality coach, test manager, automation specialist in her job title. But I have a lot of history in test. I'm passionate about testing. And one of the reasons that I've ended up speaking at conferences and doing workshops is because I have a specialism in testing blockchain applications. That came about in around 2013, 2014, when I discovered the magical world of cryptocurrency and developed a crypto app, and quickly realized that there weren't so many people with a specialism in testing these things. So I've actually been to RTC before. I did a workshop 3 years ago on testing blockchain applications. People with zero interest in crypto will be pleased to know that my talk today is not about cryptocurrency. It's not to promote my cryptocurrency book or the next one I'm writing, but I'm probably going to draw on blockchain applications as an example of the sort of thing that we can use open source testing for. So what is open source testing and why am I talking about it now? It's a really good... No, clicker's not. I'm going to have to walk backwards and forwards, and you're probably going to be entertained by me falling over those wires at some point. So, the whole point of this conference is about changing perspectives or gaining new perspectives on testing. It's a brilliantly curated conference, and I've challenged myself to get you to question your perspectives. So, we'll take a quick vote here. You've got this scenario. You've been working really, really hard on this really important release. You've been working day and night. Everybody's putting a lot of pressure on you. You think you've tested everything. Your product goes out, and then you hear through an announcement through the normal corporate channels, hey, a user has found this bug. It would have been a complete disaster if this bug had not been found. We've allowed the person to report it through our bug bounty program, and we have given this person $20,000. How do you feel? No one else seems very upset about it or is complaining that you're doing a bad job. Everybody's going, hey, it's really cool that this vulnerability got discovered. But how, as a tester, do you feel? Do you choose number one? Happy that the vulnerability's been found? Are you happy for your company or your project? Or do you feel awkward? That we're very isolated, that didn't have dependencies on open source software. Banking never used to use open source software at all. Now we have software that not only has multiple dependencies, it has to run on multiple devices. We don't just have mobile devices, we have things like Alexa. Things have to work with voice activation. We have IoT, so we have software that might run in the context of a particular type of hardware. We have the growth of cloud platforms. If you're using AWS or Google Cloud a lot, you'll notice that sometimes we can have outages that are an issue with the cloud platform, or the cloud platform not working with our application in the expected way. We've got interdependencies on third-party APIs and user-generated content. And the point is that many of these things are open source. And we're so used to open source software that we don't even question a lot of the time that we're using it and how it actually gets there. I had the privilege in my last job of working in a small team where the team leader and CTO was one of the core members of the Ruby on Rails development team. And it was a real eye-opener seeing all the applications that depend on this, and the software actually being developed by people on a goodwill basis, often in their spare time, or with time that was given to them voluntarily by the company they were working for. So we have things like Linux, Rails, Bitcoin, Selenium, things that we use every day that are all maintained and developed by open source developers. So if we can open source code, why not open source testing? And I'm going to open your eyes to some things which may seem, and I picked up on a question in the last talk about somebody saying, what about this, what about my job? I think one of the things that we have to think about as software professionals is that maybe things change in terms of the specific way we do things, but opportunities grow out of this as well. So this is possibly the only talk at the conference that will show you how to potentially become a millionaire. But apart from that, there are lots and lots of advantages in considering open source testing. So this really speaks to Rob's great keynote, which he just gave. In the real world, we have I think his analogy of all the atoms in the known world was a lot better than this. But if you think about yourself as a lone tester or a lone test team facing a horde of users in the real world, using your application in ways that you haven't thought of, either accidentally or on purpose, and with the complexity of modern systems, all the interdependencies, of which using open source components is only one, we are left with this multiplicity of possible use cases and user journeys that we as an individual or a team can't possibly capture and anticipate. And some of these are actually not code bugs. It requires, just as in Rob's slides, on thinking up all the strange ways people might use your system. And anything that's dependent on user-generated input is really, really vulnerable to this. And there have been a few high-profile examples. The first case was in the UK. So for an international audience, it could perhaps be enlightening to know that when a 10-year-old girl in the UK asked Alexa what she could do because she was bored, Alexa told her to take a coin and put it in the plug socket, because Alexa had actually taken content from a Reddit board where people were suggesting different hacks and challenges that teenagers were doing. And talking about this, obviously, is a very bad thing, because everybody knows you shouldn't stick anything metal into a plug socket. Similarly, the famous Microsoft chatbot, and I still can't quite believe that Microsoft released this. It was supposed to learn from people on social media and interact with them. And of course, it was a complete public relations disaster for Microsoft, because after the first couple of days, it learnt from the worst of social media. And it started communicating all these absolutely awful things that you really wouldn't want to read, and Microsoft had to very quickly take it down. those are very much bugs in requirements instead of code. It's part of the quality landscape. And obviously this is the sort of thing that we as testers should be questioning and trying to mitigate. But you can't think up every possible edge case scenario. Okay, those were obvious ones. In the world of crypto, there was a really famous hack in 2016 in which the hacker stole millions of dollars, but then argued that it was not actually illegal because the requirements were such that he was able to transfer the funds to himself because somebody hadn't thought about a particular edge case. So it wasn't actually stealing, it wasn't hacking, it wasn't taking somebody's password. It was just the purpose of this application allows me to do this, so I have done this. And it was just people hadn't thought about it. You can't think of everything, and you shouldn't beat yourself up because you haven't thought of everything, especially not when there are, n to the power of whatever different combinations of awful things that could go wrong. So the point is, users do really weird things that you can't mitigate against everything. How many people in this room knew about the Google Docs bug? Yeah, a couple of people have seen this. Google Docs crashes, goes completely blank screen if you type in, and I mean, they fixed it now, but it doesn't work with any other word, only and. Pokemon Go, first generation. There are actually strange Pokemon that can't be caught that used to cause a screen freeze because there were 105 different slots for the first gen Pokemon. Not all of them were used. So you ended up with the missing number Pokemon. And people shouldn't be able to get to them, but they do. The hidden world in Red Dead Redemption 2, we'll come to that next. But first, I wanted to just give a shout out to Claudia over there, who I had a conversation with at breakfast, because gaming is particularly relevant for this. As a tester, you're probably not going to know as much about your product as the superfans. So you have people like in the Lost Worlds wiki, for example, who know obsessively everything about every generation of the game. They might be game developers themselves. They might figure out weird ways to use the game in unexpected ways that, unless you also happen to be a superfan and possibly a games developer, you are not going to know. And out of that, of course, comes the idea of the speed runs in games. Thank you, Claudio. Where people try to finish the game in as quick a time as possible by using different techniques that you, however well you know your product, you might not know it as well as other people. So I'm just going to play a 10-second video clip because I just love this video. It's from Red Dead Redemption 2. And they made a little documentary about it because it's such a beautiful story. This little group of friends who were playing Red Dead Redemption 2 remotely found if they did something in particular, they fell off the edge of the world. But there was a world beyond the map that they weren't supposed to discover. You could argue that this wasn't a bug. It was an unexpected side effect that turned into something wonderful, and they made a documentary about it. But the question is, no amount of testing in traditional terms would have discovered this. If you want to check it out, that's the movie. It's absolutely wonderful. They went on for hours exploring this magical world, and Rockstar Games said it was just artifacts that got left there in the end and didn't get removed because people didn't think anything would see them. But it's an example of the sort of thing that you can't anticipate and you can't test for. So going back to my specialist subject, which is blockchain and crypto, this is particularly important in the context of decentralized financial systems, because you have these huge honeypots. You have hundreds of millions of dollars worth of assets secured in open source protocols, where perhaps there isn't a formal test team, but where there are plenty of people around who are willing to test, or who might have this as their specialism. And also, it can be quite difficult to find skilled testers who are prepared to take on the responsibility of putting themselves in the front line for discovering or not discovering these bugs. So Web3 systems, blockchain systems, are notoriously difficult to test because you can't actually replicate live networks, because they run on thousands of computers worldwide, which are very powerful. You can only get so far with simulation. They have multiple moving parts. So in the way of all open source software, you have systems that interface with systems in completely unexpected ways. And also you have this army of potential hackers out there who have knowledge that perhaps you as a tester, you might be able to analyze the risks, but you might not be able to mitigate the risks entirely. So what do people actually do? They reach out to the community with bug bounty programs. And I can completely understand that this can be quite confronting if you're a tester, to say, hey, we're going to reach out outside the people who are being paid to do this as a regular job, because it makes us feel disempowered, like the skill that we have acquired over years, maybe decades, is being put to one side. But that's not actually the case. And there are plenty of opportunities for testers to work with the community, and also as open source testers themselves, in a way that completely broadens the scope of testing and improves the resilience of the products that we're working on. And weirdly, bug bounties are not a new idea. Has anyone here actually participated in a bug bounty program? A couple of hands at the back, that's great. They've been around for a long time, nearly 40 years. Perhaps even longer in an informal sense. So the first one was 1983, but now we have these purpose-built bounty platforms like HackerOne, BugCrowd, and for crypto people specifically, ImmuneFi. So the idea is that you not just gamify the experience, but you incentivize it with money. Because while there is a hardcore of people who will find bugs just for the joy of it, and I suspect there are a few people in this room, we've all done it, right? You've given something in your personal life that you are trying out for the first time. It's instinctive. You want to look for the bugs, you want to see what's wrong with it. We all do that. But there are ways to monetize that. So not expecting users to work for free, unless you are something like a small non-profit. Companies should put resources into these programs and run them properly. And the other point is that this should not be something that excludes the test team. I've spoken to people at companies where the test team are really isolated from the people who develop the bug bounty program. That is a really bad thing for reasons which I will show you. And it's absolutely imperative, because testers tend to know other testers. They go to events like this. If your company is running a bug bounty program, you shouldn't see that as something to fear. You should involve your network in it, because I think testers have superpowers, and we should be getting the people that we know who have superpowers to help us improve our product. So you can have bug bounties that really have eye-watering rewards on offer. These examples that I've highlighted here are all live bug bounty programs that are available now on a platform called ImmuneFi. So you will see rewards of up to $5 million on the Chainlink network. And that's not an isolated example. And it's not there just as a headline. People have been paying out rewards of this size. And these are organizations that have absolutely dedicated testers who engage with the community to get the message about the bug bounty programs out there and see it as an integral part of their quality approach, because they recognize that one tester or one test team cannot do everything. You cannot fight an army of hackers with specialist knowledge. You need people outside your organization to help you. So what are the rules? Obviously, I've heard informally about bug bounty programs that have gone horribly wrong because somebody has gone off, not consulted the test team, and started offering money for people to find all these different bugs. And then you end up with people submitting bug reports for things that the test team have already found. And because you've legally contracted to pay people, these people who have devised a bug bounty program but without the help of their test team have ended up paying for duplicate bugs or paying for silly things that would get fixed that are either known bugs or which are irrelevant. So in terms of the overall quality strategy, the test team should really be the gatekeepers of any bug bounty program. The tester can also be realistic about what is a problem and help the team creating the bug bounty to qualify different levels of bug or vulnerability according to the processes and standards which you have already set. I think a good way is to see the outside world as a type of specialist resource. Like, for example, you might bring in a penetration tester because your test team is not composed of specialist penetration testers, because most of the time they would be sitting there not doing very much. You only need them at particular points in the cycle. So you can look at the community as a particular type of a person, if you like, with particular skills. It's just that you're not hiring them for 2 days. You're saying, if you find something, we will pay you. So setting expectations about what you're going to test is also really important, because a bug bounty is no solution or no alternative for all the things that we need to be able to do as testers. So all your normal processes are all super important. It doesn't take away your responsibilities, and it does not diminish your job in any way. All you're doing is this idea that Rob mentioned about how real users use your product in the real world. You're inviting feedback on this, and because people don't give their time for nothing, you're incentivizing them to help you. So things that you might want to agree with the people devising the bug bounty program are things like, how do you want the test report submitted in such a way that you can easily integrate the reports into your existing workflow? We use Zendesk, for example. We have bug bounty reports going into a particular Zendesk box where they get triaged. And it's also really important that the test team are able and willing to triage these bug reports in such a way that duplicates are really quickly ruled out and so on, or that they can replicate the bug easily. So you might want to lay down exactly what people include, like do you have screen grabs, screen videos, details of operating systems. That is all within your control to specify. Third-party bugs, also a really useful thing that people forget to exclude. So you might get hit with a whole swathe of bug reports from the outside that are caused by an integration with another product. Your company doesn't want to have to pay people for this, but if you haven't specified up front that you're not going to pay for third-party things, you're on the hook for it. You might decide to exclude UI bugs, for example, on the basis that if your test team hasn't been asked to prioritize these because maybe the development team don't have time to fix trivial bugs, you don't want the development team on the hook to fix trivial bugs and also have to pay for them. Or you might limit the scope of your bug bounty program to security issues only. So it's very important to think ahead as to how the bounty program fits into your overall quality strategy, where your responsibilities start and end. And in that way, you're going to get the most out of it and not just be hit with a whole load of duplicate bug reports that you then have to sift through that cause you extra work, because that's the sort of thing that does breed resentment in an already overworked team. So we have, you might have seen the screen grab that I showed you before of the current bounties offering to pay millions of dollars and thought, well, they can say that. I bet they never pay out. It's really tempting to see a headline-grabbing figure like that and assume that it has absolutely no basis in reality. But just a couple of months ago, the Polygon network, which is a layer 2 blockchain, they paid out $2 million to a tester who discovered a bug that if somebody had exploited it, it would have cost them $85 million. So I don't think there are any testers in this room who have an annual salary of more than $2 million. If there are, I think you'd probably be sitting on a yacht somewhere instead of at a test conference. But it is interesting to know that it is worth a company or a project's while to pay out literally millions of dollars to people for something which, although they have a test team, they would not expect their test team to have discovered. It's not like, oh, we had to pay out £2 million to this person, why didn't the testers discover it? It's a complementary rather than a competitive idea. And a savings protocol called Wormhole actually paid $10 million, which is an absolutely extraordinary amount. And the interesting thing is that some of the people who are discovering these vulnerabilities, they'd probably do it for fun anyway, because they're really into it. We've launched our own bug bounty program. We don't promise to pay $1 million, but our top bounty is $50,000. I've been working on scoping that myself. So if anyone's interested, take a look. Real life bounty program. If you've got any questions, ask me about it. The final point is what happens when it's not your project. So far, I've talked about managing a bug bounty program within the context of your own company or your own project. Why not have a go, like the intrepid people at the back who've already participated in a bug bounty program? You might not earn millions, but it's a really good way of honing your skills. I had a great time at the testathon last night, and the team which I was informally cheerleading for, Team 5, who did a great presentation, impressed me when put on the spot about a question from the judges about whether the application they were testing had been compared with other apps. And the person presenting the test report came back with the answer that I've never used one of these apps, so I feel that it gave me a fresh perspective, looking at something for the first time and testing it. In that way, making ignorance a superpower. And it really is. On the projects that we work on, 7 days a week, 8-9 hours a day, we get used to seeing the same things. If you're happy in your job, you might stay with your company or project for a really long time. And we all know that when you see things for the first time is often when you notice things. It's like the paint that's coming off your window ledge at home, or the dripping tap that you don't notice, but that somebody walking into an apartment for the first time will notice. So if you look at someone else's project, it gives you a fresh perspective on testing. I wouldn't go as far as saying to people, create, have a party, have a bug bounty party. Personally, I think that would be really fun, and it's something that you could consider. Get together with some test friends, decide that you're going to earn some money, have some beer and some wine, and sit around a table and do a bug hunt for a couple of hours. But it can hone your testing skills. I think it's a great way to challenge yourself as a tester and experience new boundaries. So the thing that I'm going to finish up with, weirdly, about a month after RTC published the program for this, including my talk, I saw a LinkedIn post on open source testing. And my first reaction was, oh, thank goodness, nobody's going to think that I've stolen this idea because the program was out first. It was a LinkedIn post by, if you don't already follow Andrew Knight, Automation Panda. He's a developer advocate at Applitools, and he is always really interesting, always really on point. His post was very different from mine about open source testing. It wasn't really about bug bounties. It was more about open sourcing your exploratory test scripts and your test plans and so on. It's a really interesting read, and I would recommend anyone to follow up this talk with having a look at his post, because I just felt that it really broadened the idea of open source testing, not just to creating and participating in bug bounties, but in the idea of open sourcing our tests to the wider community to build confidence in our product. And he's got some really interesting ideas there. So now, I'm going to ask exactly the same question as I asked at the beginning of the talk. Armed with all this new knowledge, if you were in exactly the same situation, but you had been working with other people within your company, collaborating to define the scope of the bug bounty program, and you were confident that the bug that was discovered was something that your team had not committed to test, would you still have the same reaction? How many people now would still feel number two, or would they be more inclined to feel number one? Hands up if you feel number two. Still a couple of people, but far fewer. I'm going to regard that as some kind of success in challenging perceptions around open source testing. And I think, yes, that was my last slide. So I'll open up questions. We have no online questions yet. Do we have any questions in the audience? Okay, we've got one up front.
Hey, I have a question about the contract in engaging with the bug bounty, because usually security issues require to have permission, and I think I would be very afraid to try to push the boundaries of the software without having that kind of permission. So should I have a written contract before starting testing this kind of companies?
That is an excellent question. And probably if I do this talk again, this is the first time I've delivered it, I would do a slide for that. If it's wiser to engage in a bug bounty program through a recognized platform such as HackerOne or BugCrowd, because they lay down the exact rules around what you should and shouldn't do. There's a long list of rules, and if you submit your discovery through their platform, then you know that you're safely within the bounds of what's allowed. Different companies may set different rules, but normally the main exclusions are around disclosure. So they might have quite a loose criterion that you're allowed to probe their system, but you can't actually make any monetary gain for that, and you can't publicize it anywhere. You can't push if you've used a script, you can't push it to an open GitHub repo, for example, or even some are tighter, you can't push it to any kind of repo, even a private repo. But yes, be careful. If you are engaging with a program that's on a company's own platform and it doesn't specify this, be very careful. Thanks for the warning. But engaging via a reputable platform like HackerOne or BugCrowd or Immunify, as long as you follow the guidelines there, then you're covered.
Do we have another question? We have no question from online. Then we can stop here. Okay.
So for the most of the projects that I worked on, we have the client support, and we have a very good relationship with our clients. Is that considered open source testing, or basically we are, I don't know, kind of tricking the clients to provide us the issues and the failures, and we're then reporting them with the support that we have?
That's a really excellent point. I would totally regard that as open source testing. It's obviously not a formal bug bounty, but the fact that you are receiving feedback from your clients, do you have a particular route for them to report the vulnerabilities, or is it informal? Okay, perfect. Yes, well, that's a great example of open source testing, because that is exactly as I described, the project, your software being used in the wild by real users often turns up things that it's very, very difficult to anticipate or replicate in a staging environment. And if I ever do this talk again, I would actually include that as a subclass of open source testing. However, I'd like to make the point that if your clients are frequently doing all this free work for you, I hope that it's replicated in some kind of discount or reward for them. But that's really great to hear, because feedback from real users, it's really depressing to think of that just disappearing into a black hole somewhere and not being used to improve your product. Thank you for the question.
Wonderful talk. One topic I have around bug bounties is when someone finds a bug bounty, if millions are offered, have you any thoughts on why someone would go to bug bounty program as opposed to selling it to, say, a government or a state who'd use it, you know, like a 0 days defect or something like that? Why would someone go to bug bounty program as opposed to, say, going a different path?
That's a great question, and I think that is one of the reasons that we see those really high bug bounties. Obviously, somebody who is acting on behalf of a state or an organization, or who is doing things for political ends, probably cannot be bought off by money. But if somebody is seeking out a vulnerability to make money themselves, then you have to give them enough money to incentivize them not to just steal it. A lot of people are white hat hackers anyway, who will do things for ethical reasons and for the fun of it. But in the case of people who are doing things for bad reasons, there have actually been quite a few examples of especially in the Web3 crypto community, of people who've committed really big hacks but have been contacted through back channels by the development team and persuaded to turn it into a bounty. So instead of stealing this, why don't we give you however many £1 million, you walk away, you don't have Interpol after you, and everything's cool. So there have been instances like that, but that is the reason that we see such high bug bounties when there is a lot of money at stake. But I agree with you, if somebody is seeking to exploit something for political ends, or they're a whistleblower, or they want to reveal wrongdoing, then they're not going to be bought off by a bug bounty. Fantastic question, thank you.
We have a question online.
Yes, we've got, I think, 90 seconds left. Thank you for the online question. Excuse me. What is the likelihood that as a normal tester without pen test experience, excuse me, I can find critical issues in bug bounty programs? Aren't these mainly for hackers? Well, actually, and I'm going to have to take a sip of water, sorry. I was at Agile Testing Days in Potsdam, I think maybe 4 years ago, and Nicola Sedgwick gave a fantastic talk. And I don't know if any of you have listened to Nicola before. She's a well-known tester, test manager, and speaker. She is not a specialist penetration tester, even though she's very experienced as a tester and quite technical. But she was able to find a critical bounty in a payday loan company through a bounty program, which she got paid quite a lot of money for. So it's not unheard of for non-specialists to actually get bounty rewards. So I'm expecting lots of people in this room to be on HackerOne or BugCrowd later today, seeing what they can do. And I think I'm probably going to have to stop now. Have I got time to
let's try with the last question.
Amazing, thank you. Can someone scroll up? What about a smaller scale bug? I'm really glad we took this question. A smaller scale bug bounty inside the organization. Team ABC tests the software of Team D. Does anyone do this? I think it's a brilliant idea, and it would make me want to go and work at a company that had a program like that. Because what I said before about ignorance being a superpower, and if you haven't seen software before, being able to spot bugs, I think cross-team bounties would be an absolutely amazing idea. And I'd love to hear about anyone who's implemented it successfully. I think that is a superb idea. Thank you, anonymous suggester, anonymous questioner, for that suggestion. I think that's awesome.